And we are back with our next segment and looking at how to make kids or our young people more successful given the 21st century and all the changes that are ever changing. But there's some things that are still universal and still staples.
There are. I think we talked a little bit about just things that people need to do as you're guiding your kid towards a career. And I always kind of discourage people from making a kid, come up with a major right away. But you just kind of give them some guidance, and that guidance should be around what their earning potential is going to be in the beginning, okay? And we'll do a whole other segment on that. Don't even jump on that shit. But you also want to make sure that as you're guiding your child towards a career, you have to stay aware of the changes that are happening in the world, and especially in this 21st century. You want to make sure that the career that you're guiding them towards is not something that can be done overseas cheaper or that can be automated.
Definitely, and you made a good point, because what's the whole point? If they're going overseas, that means that business or corporation is paying less, which means your reliability. And like you said, with automation, it's all about efficiency. You think about, and I'm going back to Hidden Figures, the whole point where the computers were a team of like 20 or 30 people that did all the computations, and they brought in the IBM, and that was the first generation IBM, and think about how many, problems or whatever it was able to solve in such a small period of time. But if you notice in the film, without giving too much away, if you hadn't seen it, go see it.
Spoiler alert.
But
right?
part of what what they did is they saw the changes, and they saw that if we don't make adjustments, we're going to be out of a job. And because of the adjustments they made, they were able all to be retained.
And this also goes back to what we were speaking about in the earlier shows of people that are disgruntled. So when we look at, for instance, taxi drivers, I went about a year or so ago. I was down in Florida, and they didn't allow Uber into the
Uber
airport.
Or Lyft, yeah.
So we had a taxi driver pick us up. The taxi driver, the whole ride, complained about Uber. And, I was thinking to myself, man, you've got to see the writing on the wall. Uber's not going anywhere, okay? Mm-hmm. And even the people that are driving for Uber, their time is limited. You're not going to be able to drive for Uber very long, because in the next 10 years, cars may be driving themselves. And so where does that leave you? And when we look at the trucking industry, we don't know what's happening, but they also have self-driving semis. They think it's going to be safer. So you have to look ahead. You have to stay on top of the changes that are happening in the STEM world. And again, you don't have to become immersed in it, but you don't want to be in one of those situations like a lot of engineers were about 8 to 10 years ago, right, where all of a sudden a bunch of jobs ended up going overseas, and now you're displaced and you can't find another job.
Like you said, awareness is the key, and staying alert, staying informed, staying educated, staying engaged. And that's definitely something like what we see now, and we talked about a little bit earlier regarding technology, even from 10 years ago, is ever changing. So it's one of those things where definitely put the emphasis on being as educated, informed, and engaged as possible. So when something is a trend, that's something you want to pay attention to, because that trend could be the norm. So like you're saying in regards to Uber and Lyft, it's just a more viable option. You're not getting gouged to the same degree as a taxi. So if I'm a taxi driver, maybe that means I've got to transition, and you've got to transition to something else. Maybe you do have to drive for those services. Or maybe you look at, something else that still ties in with, transportation or whatnot. You have to be aware.
Yeah, and then if you're not into technology, there are some careers that you can pick that are still going to be, we think, as of now, are still going to be viable.
Yeah, I mean, you think about kind of tying in, as long as cars and trucks and that are going to be the main form of transportation, anyone in the automobile industry, you think about it, how many people, now some people might know how to change their own oil, which is good, but how many of you are going to, if your car gets in a wreck, you're going to go ahead and identify, the new or recycled parts, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to need, people there. Same thing when your air conditioning goes out, which I pray and trust it does not go out, especially down here. Right. We don't want that happening.
We don't want that.
But how many people are really going to go ahead and do that type of work?
Right.
Or electrical work, or
Plumbing.
landscape, things along those
Right.
lines. So there are still going to be some, quote, universal or standard, or whatever you want to call it, that it's still going to be a need, and you can still do well in those areas. But always just keep an eye out for changes within that particular field and ask yourself, are you able to make those adjustments? Or if you're not able or willing to, what are you going to transition into
Right.
next?
And you should always be thinking about what's going to happen next if something happens to, my job, my career, what happens next? And you have to get your kids to think about that. Most kids go to school and they want to become pro athletes. Well, if you don't get to become a pro athlete, then what? You have to do the
Right.
same thing in the career world is, focus on a career, focus on something, but make sure that you're able to do something else, that you have a backup skill.
And one thing, and maybe we might be able to talk about this if we have time for another segment, is like even in regards to we're talking about underlying education, but education doesn't always have to be your traditional 4-year. It can be your 2-year, your
Yeah.
trade, or your tech, because those can still provide those outlets, avenues, access to resources where you're still able to make those changes in an ever-changing landscape.
Definitely, definitely. Well, we want to thank you for spending time with us today and making your kids more successful in the 21st century. This is definitely a topic that we'll be bringing up again. So if you do want to give us your opinion or ask us a question, you can send us an email at timelytalk404@gmail.com, or you can reach me at Emma Knows Money on Twitter and Instagram. And how can they reach you?
Yeah, if they need to reach me outside of email, they can reach me at Snorton CCS. That's going to be on Instagram and Twitter, or you can just hit me up Twitter at Snorton, Instagram at IceColdDrew06.
That's right.
And we really look for, you can tell we have fun, but we also want to make sure that we're leaving you guys with some things for you to think about, things for you to pursue, things to continue to ask us, so we can kind of put that out there, so we're doing what we can to be the best resource possible. So thank you for taking time to join us today.
Thank you.
And join us next time.
And join us next time.
And the time after that. And
the
tell
time
somebody.
after-
And the time after that too, yeah. Tell somebody. Be a friend. Tell a friend.
Oh, and I have to say hi, Mom, because we only have 2 viewers, right?
It's growing. We just gotta make sure we're it's just like a movie. We're starting off slow, but we're gradually picking up our pace and
That's
space.
right, that's
so
right.
thank you for joining us. Until next time, seriously, all of you out there, take very good care, continued blessings and success, and look forward to seeing you soon.